Tommi Avicolli Mecca will be presenting excerpts from his novel In the Making. Over the years, we've heard his intense poetry about his upbringing in Philadelphia, his Italian mother and father, the Catholic Church, as it was when he grew up in the 50s and coming of age in the 60s and 70s. This manuscript tells his family's story from coming over to finding security and success via his father's gas station and car repair business. Through it all, we see precious details of his life, those who touched him in the neighborhood, the school, and those important friends along his own journey that eventually brought him to San Francisco and led to his work with tenants' rights and the social protest movements of our generation. His voice of compassionate passion, idealism, and it's a visionary view of what could be. And Tommi asked me to read this introduction to what he's going to read. And before I do, Tommi, do you want speaker view or gallery view for the recording?
I want the little windows.
Okay, we'll keep it this way.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the introduction to what Tommi is going to read. While campaigning to win the support of the peasants in southern Italy for his plan to unify the many kingdoms and city-states of the Italian peninsula into a single country, Italy, General Garibaldi promised them land and a reduction of taxes. After Italy was unified in 1861, Garibaldi left it in the hands of the king to fulfill that promise. It never happened. There were rebellions by the peasants in the 1860s that were suppressed by the government. Eventually, millions of those peasants left this new country for America. And I'm muting me and
Where Olive Trees Don't Grow, Part 1, Aviano, Italy, August 1909. The wind from the night before has finally rested, and the fledgling morning that's stirring all yellow and red behind the hills is taking its time arriving. The fog that gathered at the top of the hills, sitting meditatively for hours before it finally rolled down onto the thirsty plains below, has disappeared like the ghosts who walked down from the hills and through the streets on Il Giorno dei Morti, the Day of the Dead. It won't be long before the sun spills onto the rooftops and all over the bushy heads of the trees, leaving a dappled shade that seems to have the jitters when the breeze shakes the leaves. A single white cloud floats like a flattened halo above the blue-gray mountains that embrace the village of Aviano. It lies in the deepest south of Italy, between the toe and the heel, in an area of the region of Lucania that sometimes becomes so dry, dust rises with a will of its own and powders the streets and La Piazza with a sandy gray snow. Or the rocks and dirt grumble and rumble and tumble down the hillsides without warning, as if nature is cleaning house or having a terrible temper tantrum. On the old dirt road at the edge of town, Giuseppe Venticelli is slowly making his way, walking alongside the gray and white donkey he calls Tino. Barely 5 foot tall, Giuseppe has hair as black as a crow, eyes brown and wise and cautious as an owl, and nose as prominent as an eagle and sturdy as an old tree trunk. They passed the tall wooden poles on the outskirts of town where once the heads of rebellious peasants were hung. The area has a long history that weighs heavily on this small village. It's like a debt that can't be forgiven. For Giuseppe, it was a restless night. He woke quietly and went outside for a while. When he got back to bed, he thought he saw his father standing near the window. The moon was large behind him. He had his arms folded over his chest. He looked like he had something on his mind. It's not the first time in the past few weeks that he's seen Vincenzo's ghost. He's never told his wife, Margarita. He doesn't want her consulting with the old Strega on the opposite side of town with her herbs and potions and spells. He thinks the woman's pazza, crazy. He's tired. He's spent too many of his 26 years from the time he was still a boy working the unforgiving fields. A contadino sharecropper, he earns about 20 cents a day and a portion of what he grows for the signore, the landowner who lives in the great estate on the hill. His share includes beans, grains, corn, some vegetables, and legumes, seldom meat or eggs. His wife, Margarita, has 3 hens. She mostly sells the eggs to pay for things they desperately need, such as salt, matches, or quinine to treat malaria, which is still rampant in the South, despite government efforts to eradicate it. The sun beats on his flesh, his skin turns deeper and deeper olive, his sweat runs like rivers down his face and his always aching shoulders and lower back. All he has with him is a hoe, a container of water, and a small bit of food to tide him over. No matter how much he toils, no matter how much he begs the earth and the useless God above, La Terra never produces enough. The soil is too worn. There isn't sufficient rain, and when it does come, it's torrential and washes away the topsoil. The land's been a problem since the Romans chopped down the forests for wood for houses and ships. They left wounds that still haven't healed. Like the God of the Old Testament, Giuseppe only has Sunday as his one day of rest, a time to spend napping in the shade under a tree or to drink and play cards with the other men. It's not a time to waste in church, listening to Father Scafani, a humorless man who's more at ease with the signori and the corrupt politicians who run the village than he is with the farmers in the fields. He has skin like the ragged side of the hills and thinning hair the color of an old tree trunk. He's no stranger to sins of the flesh. Some of the women say that when God called him, the good Lord must have been desperate. Another damn day. Hey, Tino, Giuseppe says to his little friend, who brays in agreement as they walk down the ancient dirt road. It hasn't rained for a while. Papa was here again last night. They passed trees that he and his brother Emilio used to climb when they were boys. Emilio left for Argentina a few years ago. He never says nothing, Giuseppe says of his father's ghost. I know what he's thinking. I'm betraying him and what he fought for, but I can't do what he did. It's hard enough doing what I gotta do. Suddenly, a carreto, a makeshift wooden cart with 2 large wheels pulled by a donkey, approaches from the bend in the road up ahead. It carries the sorts of things a handyman might have. Ah, the man who talks to donkeys, the short, heavy-set, mustached, balding driver says in a loud voice, his one arm holding on to the reins, the other waving in the air. He barely makes a living doing odd jobs. He's a good listener, Giuseppe says. As long as he don't talk back, the man says, laughing and pulling the reins to bring his donkey to a complete halt. The animal glances at Tino indifferently. Buongiorno, Giovannini. Giuseppe says, smiling. You must have news. You always got news, and it's never good. Ah, well, I hear tell that Rome's talking about a new tax. What good's that going to do? Giuseppe asks. They can't get water from a stone. Ah, but they try. The tax collector went to Widow Sarducci's house yesterday, and she had nothing. No furniture, just a couple beds and a table and chairs in the kitchen. He took her goat. We need to do what they did before, only this time we'll stick their heads on the poles. And what good will that do? Giuseppe asks. Maybe it'll make the Signori and the Northerners treat us with respect. Nah, Giuseppe says, they think we're no better than the dirt, and they've never had respect for the dirt. What if the dirt poisons them? The man laughs and continues down the road, singing a bawdy old Napolitano song. Giuseppe thinks of his father and grandfather and how they took part in the peasant rebellions that broke out after the Risorgimento, the unification of the country's kingdoms and city-states that failed to bring land reform for the peasants in the South. His father was still in his teens. Let me tell you some things, my little friend, so you understand, Giuseppe says to Tino as they turn the bend. He can see the fields in the far distance. We who work the land have always been without the land, except when Napoleon drove out the Spanish. He gave the farmers 2.5 acres each, but the Spanish came back, and my great-great-grandfather lost everything. He had debt. There was always debt. A little piece of land wasn't enough to support his family. The Signori and the church made damn sure of that. You need a little water, mio caro amico? He stops and opens the water bottle. Holding his fingers cup-shaped and tightly pressed against each other, he pours a little in the palm of his hand and holds it close to Tino's mouth. The donkey's spatula-shaped tongue quickly laps it up. Giuseppe swallows a mouthful directly from the bottle. He glances up at the yellow-red sun, covering his eyes with his hand. A flock of birds seem to be flying into it. He starts to walk again. Garibaldi was supposed to make everything right, drive out the foreign invaders, and make one country, Italia. Garibaldi came to Sicilia. He removed the pasta and salt taxes and promised the contadini that he'd give them a piece of land. Garibaldi had an army of 1,000 men in red shirts. Spedizione di Mille, Expedition of the 1,000. That's what they called it. That little army drove the foreign rulers and their mighty armies from all of the South. The farmers loved him. They believed in him. It was like Christ had come. But they ended up with nothing. We're always going to have nothing. That's what my papa don't understand. Giuseppe wipes his forehead and cheeks, looking to the distant fields that waver and shimmer like a miracle or a mirage. On the way home, you do all the talking, eh, Tino? When Giuseppe's done in the fields, it's already dark. His back and neck ache, as do his hands and feet. He looks up to the moon. It's full. It's almost too bright to stare at. He grabs some dandelion and salad for dinner and fodder for Tino. He rubs the donkey's ears affectionately before they slowly make their way down the road towards his 2-room shack on the edge of town. The hot night feels like a weight pressed against his body. He's almost home when he feels a terrible chill come over him. It makes his body shudder and shake. He stops, looking around. You feel that, Tino? He asked the donkey, folding his arms over his chest. Tino looks at the huge old tree across the road where Vincenzo stands. Giuseppe sees him too. Che mi vuoi fa? Non c'è da fa. What do you want me to do? There's nothing I can do, Papa. He knows there's only one way he's going to escape his father's ghost. So Giuseppe comes to the United States later that year. In February 1911, his wife Margarita and their 3 young children make the journey. This is an excerpt from the chapter about Margarita and the children's long, arduous journey to join Giuseppe in South Philadelphia, where he settled. This is February 1911. When they board the SS König Albert, they're deloused and hastily examined by a doctor. Their bags are fumigated with smoke. Questions are fired at Margarita. What's your name? What's your age? Do you have money with you? Have you ever been in prison? Are you an anarchist? She doesn't even know what an anarchist is. She's afraid she'll say something wrong and they'll be refused passage. Having the interpreter doesn't help her relax. He speaks a different dialect. She has to ask him to repeat the question or say it slower. The steerage area at the bottom of the boat, where several hundred people are packed together in a single large room, is dirty and cold and crowded. Rats roam freely. The smell of stale air, vomit, and unbathed bodies is unbearable. The few toilets are filthy and inadequate. People constantly scratch their heads from the lice. Margarita and the kids sleep in their clothes on narrow bunks. The mattresses are filled with straw or seaweed or both. Maria cuddles with her mother. The boys sleep on a separate bunk. They're given eating utensils, a tin lunch pail with attachments for vegetables and meat. They're served soup that's lukewarm, black bread, potatoes, and beef that's tough to chew. Margarita's glad that she packed some Mustasoli cookies that help them sate their appetites and sweeten the aftertaste in their mouths. She also brought a towel and a bar of soap since the ship doesn't supply them. There's never enough food or fresh water, no place to take a bath. She can feel the grime building up on her skin. She's itchy. The children complain a lot, especially Pietro. She's not surprised. He was colic as a baby. Maria gets in fights with some of the other kids. Men aggressively proposition Margarita. At one point, the children take turns kicking a man who won't take no for an answer from their mama. Before long, Margarita starts feeling sick. Her stomach hurts all the time. She throws up from the constant rocking of the boat. Other people get sick too. The vomit is not cleaned up right away. It's worse when a sudden storm explodes from out of nowhere. The boat sways back and forth as if the hand of some deity is playing with it. Maria tries to comfort her by stroking her hair and face. A lot of the passengers are panicking. A man with a mandolin starts playing songs from his village. Another man joins in with his concertina. Before long, people begin dancing and clapping their hands to the beat. It doesn't stop Margarita's stomach from hurting, but it puts her a little more at ease. People cheer when the storm winds down to a slight rumbling in the distance. One night, Margarita and the children are awakened by a loud scuffle near where they're sleeping. 3 men trying to grab a baby out of its mother's arms. The hysterical mother kicks and elbows the men. She screams for help. No one comes to her aid. Finally, one of the men manages to pull the baby from the woman's arms while the other 2 hold her back. The man with the infant races up to the deck of the ship where he tosses the dead baby overboard into the cold, dark Atlantic waters. It's over a week and a half before they arrive at New York Harbor. Standing on the deck in the cold, fresh air, Margarita falls to her knees and makes the sign of the cross. For the first time since she left Italy, Margarita feels a little glimmer of hope. We now skip way ahead to 1959. The family is living in a poor area near the Italian market in South Philadelphia. This is an area that the city, in many of its writings and its plans, consider this a slum. And redevelopment has plans to redevelop this area. But this is 1959, before all that's been put into action. It's home to Italians, Jews, Blacks, and Irish. And the Italians and Jews are basically immigrants who came to the country around in the beginning of the 1900s, like Giuseppe did. This chapter, it's 1959, Giuseppe's youngest daughter, Angelina, and her husband, Diego, and their two sons, Eddie and Joey, are living with Giuseppe in Giuseppe's house in South Philly. And this is the beginning of part two. It's 1959, as I said 3 times. I'm nervous. Okay. 1959. Joey climbs onto the chair by the old brick fireplace in the living room. He stands, reaching out to touch the white marble mantel. It's cold. Sitting looking out the window, his cousin Gina turns to him, her dark brown curly hair combed flatly against her scalp and pulled tightly into a ponytail that hangs down her back in a long, wavy piece. She's wearing a pink dress and socks. She's not wearing her shoes. "What are you doing?" Gina asks. He doesn't answer. He steps off the chair and grabs the edge of the mantel with both hands. He hangs there for a few moments, then starts to slowly inch his way along its edge, his legs swinging like a marionette. "Look at me," he calls to Gina. His hands are beginning to get tired. He looks over to the window. "You're not looking." "I ain't gonna look. You're being stupid." When he gets to the center of the mantel, he pauses, letting his body dangle. He's not sure whether he wants to continue on or jump down and land on his feet like he did the last time. The mantel suddenly lets out a groan and splits, the pieces breaking off and making a loud sound as they hit the floor. Having nothing to hold on to, he falls. Gina jumps up from her chair and screams. Angelina comes running from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Oh my God, oh my God!" She can see that Joey's unconscious. He doesn't seem to be breathing. His skin has turned a ghastly color, kind of greenish. "Don't just sit there like an idiot," she yells to Gina. "Go get somebody. Get your mother or father. Get anybody. Just go." The frightened girl can't move. "What happened?" Giuseppe says, coming into the room. Kneeling over Joey's limp body, Angelina starts pounding on his chest. She doesn't know why. It's the only thing she can think to do. "Come on, breathe. God damn it, breathe, breathe." His chest suddenly starts moving up and down. He's still unconscious, though. Relieved that he's breathing, she lifts him off the floor and into her arms, then races out of the house, down the marble steps, and into the street, just as Maria, Joey's godmother, turns the corner and spots her sister standing in the middle of 10th Street, holding on to her godchild for dear life. A car is heading towards them. "What the hell are you doing? Are you out of your goddamn mind?" Maria yells and runs to her, dropping the cake she's carrying. The car screeches to a halt. Before the man behind the wheel can say anything, Angelina tells him, "You got to take me to the hospital." "What happened?" Maria and the driver ask at the same time. He sticks his head out the window. He doesn't know what's going on. He should drive away, but somehow he can't. I got to get him to the hospital. Don't ask me no questions, Angelina tells the man, then turns to Maria. Look after Gina and call Diego. Maria reaches into her purse and pulls out some change. Here, you'll need this for the payphone. Put it in my pocket, Angelina says, and Maria drops it into one of the big pockets of the house dress. Call me when you get there, Maria says. Let me know what's going on. I'll call Diego. Don't worry about nothing, okay? He's gonna be all right. The driver gets out and opens the car door on the passenger side. Angelina slides herself into the seat with Joey still in her arms. The man shuts the door and gets back in. You sure you don't want me to come with you? Maria asks. No, 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 no. Stay here. Call Diego. She strokes Joey's face and feels his forehead. It's hot, but at least he's still breathing. Let's go, she says to the driver. Don't forget to call me as soon as you can, Maria says as they drive off. Giuseppe, who's been standing in the doorway, walks back inside. Maria stands in the middle of the street, bowing her head and making the sign of the cross. And I will end there tonight. That's where olive trees don't grow.
So everybody.
Spellbinding.
That's
great.
awesome. I can't wait to
Awesome,
read it.
wonderful.
Yeah, I
wonderful.
can't wait.
Well written,
Excellent,
Tommy.
Tommy.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, really
Tommy,
nice.
it's thrilling.
Thank
It's
you.
absolutely, you can see everything, every word, all
Right?
oh my God.
Exactly. You know, it would make a great audio book too, as well as a print book, Tommy.
Oh, yeah.
A movie.
Absolutely thrilling.
I want it to be a movie, and I want
And a
Sophia
movie.
Loren to be in it.
Well, you better hurry up then, Tommy.
Bravo.
You're not gonna last forever,
Thank
you
you.
know.
Yay.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Well done, sir.
Thank you.
I knew it was going to be good, and it's 100 times even better than I imagined. It's
you.
spectacular. Oh my goodness.
It's
That's right.
259 pages, so I could only read a little bit, but you can imagine it.
Oh, it's really
It-
good.
It
Wow.
covers a long period in 3 generations of the family. So
I want to hear the rest of it.
do you have about 17 days? to read all that?
Of course.